Hello YouTube, this is Billy. Today I'm putting on a new strut on the front end of this 2002 Lexus ES300. The first thing I'm going to do is loosen the lug nuts just a little loose, and the car jacked up. I got me a nice jack stand down there, and the floor jack also just as backup. I'm going to go ahead and get those lug nuts the way off and set aside, and get that tire set aside out of the way. Okay, next I'm going to take a 17mm socket on my ratchet wrench and remove this nut from the sway bar there. If that center part is turning at the same time that you turn the nut there, an Allen wrench, you can fit an Allen wrench in there to hold that while you turn this. What I actually did was I just took a flathead screwdriver and wedged it in there, and was able to get it. Okay, so I just removed the nut and pulled the sway bar back and brought it down over here to the side and put the nut back on it, just so it's easy to keep up with the nut. This little plastic clip right here, you just kind of pull and wiggle on it and it'll separate from the metal there. It's got a little nipple that sticks in that hole. Same thing on this side, it's got a little nipple that sticks in that hole and helps hold that line. So you just want to get that to where it's wiggled loose, like I have this one. And now I will take a wrench and get this bolt right here removed, and this bolt right here removed. Get all this line freed up to where it can move around real good. I'm using a 12mm on my ratchet wrench and going to remove this bolt right there. Okay, after getting the bolt removed, I just put the bolt back in the hole. That way it's easy to know where the bolt is when I go to looking for it. And all it did was free up these lines here, a 10mm, and pull this one out and help free this line up. And next I'm using the ratchet wrench with a 10mm and this little bolt right here. I'm going to pull this out to help free this line up. Okay, next I'm going to begin removing these two big bolts here on the bottom of the strut itself there. And what I'm doing is I've got a 22mm ratchet wrench on one side and a 22mm wrench on the other side to hold back up, keep it from spinning. So I'm going to get both of those broke loose and get those bolts removed. Okay, so when you get the nut off of the bolt and you're trying to get the bolt to pop out of where it came from, the best advice I can give you is take the nut and screw it on there a little bit, like that, and then take a hammer and tap on it with the nut on there a little bit, and that'll just knock right in like that. And once it knocks in like that and it gets off the shoulder, then you're able to just spin this right off and then wiggle it right out, and makes things a lot easier. Okay, now when you get this top one out, it's going to want to start pivoting where this assembly right here will start wanting to come toward you. As soon as you get that bolt out, it will just want to just come toward you a little bit. It won't go like a lot because it still has that bottom bolt, but it will kind of come toward you. So on working on that bottom one, what I've done is I took one of my little extensions and shoved in there to help hold it more stationary while I'm working on the bottom one. On getting that top one to break loose, I used my breaker bar with the socket, and I used a small pipe to put on the breaker bar for more leverage, and sometimes I even tapped on it a little bit with my hammer. And on the bottom, I had to use an extension on the breaker bar. So on the bottom one, I had to use the extension in there like that. You know, same thing. And with that, with my other little extension, just shoved in there. And on getting that bottom bolt to pop out, just grab this whole thing and just kind of wiggle back and forth. And the same thing that you did to the top, on the bottom, you just have to give this some, you know, wiggle it around and push and pull, and you'll get it out. And then got both of those set aside there. So all I did was pull out my little extension that I had in there, helping hold it. And then I just wiggled and wiggled and wiggled and wiggled. And I even pushed here away from myself that way, and wiggling and push that way to get these two to separate. And you know, you want to be careful, obviously, that your lines are not in a bind. And your assembly right here, your rotor and all of this, you just want to be careful that it doesn't come too far this way. As long as it stays like it is here, that's fine. You just don't want it to come toward you and separate too far there. So you just want to let it kind of find its natural state of like it is right there. And throughout the procedure, you want to just be careful that you don't knock it this way so that it tries to separate. And anyway, so that's where we're at now. I'm going to pop the hood and start loosening on the top side. Underneath the hood, these 3 bolts, there's one, or nuts, there's one, and there's one. With my 14 millimeter, I will get these broke loose. Now I will save one of them for last, obviously, because once these 3 are removed, the strut assembly just comes right on out. So when I get to that last one, I will be holding the strut itself with one arm underneath here, and with the other arm up here, getting the last nut all the way off. That way everything's in my control. Okay, so there's the strut has been removed, and up here on this top side, I was wanting to walk you through with what I did. I loosened all 3 of those up, and the one that was the easiest for me to grab and play with was this one. So on this one, I removed that nut all the way off of it, and that way I could put it back on a little bit and then get both of these 2 all the way off. That way, whenever I'm kind of doing it with one hand, because I got one hand underneath pushing up and holding the strut up, while with my other hand turning the nut off. And I just placed my nuts up on the windshield and carefully guided it down and out, and just carefully put it right there. Make sure your new one looks exactly like your old one. And even on this end over here, where you'll notice on this piece here, it has a taller side and a shorter side. You want to make sure everything lines up exactly as the one you just pulled out when you go in with the new one. So I'll get these little nuts pulled off and set up there where I can easily grab them and slide this little new strut into place. On this one, this piece right here, this entire piece right here that I'm grabbing, this piece was slightly off kilter a little bit in comparison to the one I pulled out. So all I did was grab it and twist it so that it was in the same position as that one. I'm using the passenger side of the vehicle as a good example. You see how this piece that sticks up, you see how it's taller here and shorter here. It's a mirror image on this side, and that's how I have it sitting currently. The tall side close to the motor and the short side close to me as I'm trying to put it into place. So I'm gonna wiggle this up in there and start getting some of the nuts into place. Okay, all I did was slide it up in here with my head up in here where I could see real good, and try to line the stud to go through the little hole there. And once I was able to get one of the nuts on, and then kind of give myself some breathing time to kind of catch my breath, and then get another one, and then get another one. And I'm gonna go ahead and get these snugged up. And these are the 14 millimeter. Okay, all I've done was turn them all a little bit with the ratchet wrench and 14 millimeter. I just turned it a couple times, turned it a couple times, turned it a couple times, just couple times. Now I've still got plenty of play. You see, I can wiggle this around, so I'm purposely leaving plenty of wiggle in case that wiggle helps me get this back together and the bolts back in. And that's what I'm about to do now, is start trying to get this wiggle, you know, get this piece here wiggled back into there and get the bolts back in. Okay, now the best advice I can give you on getting these bolts re-stepped back in there, I've got my knee underneath the wheel hub here, okay? And with my knee, I'm able to put some up pressure on the hub. And with one hand, I'm able to push back on this lower part of the strut here. And with my knee going up and with my hand shoving back and with my other hand able to get the bolts to slide in. So that's the best advice I can give you on getting that done. The other trick was to give myself a break on learning the best way to get that in. I used a small wrench, because as soon as I was able to get, because this is a real small diameter, a screwdriver or something like that would also work, but once I got it to go in and was able to get something small in there, then I could kind of relax and rest and breathe for a minute and regroup. But for me, what worked really well is my knee underneath the hub, because with my knee I can push up, and right here with one hand pushing back on the strut, and with the other hand wiggling the bolt in. That worked really well. So now I'm just gonna get those nuts back on those two bolts. Okay, now with my ratchet wrench, I'm going to go ahead and get these tightened back into place. After I get those tightened back into place, then I will go to the top side and finish tightening up the top. Okay, now I've got those two bolts nice and tightened up good. Now on the top side, take my ratchet wrench and go ahead and tighten these up. I'm gonna go same as before. I'm gonna go a couple turns here, a couple turns here, a couple turns here, and I will bounce around like that until this is all the way good and tight. Okay, now that I got these three tightened up, and this one and this one tightened up first, and this one is longer. I noticed that whenever I took it apart that this one was also longer. In any event, so now I've got the bottom two big bolts tightened up good. I've got this top tightened up good. So now I'm going to start getting these lines back in place. And this 10mm bolt, I will get this little piece. It's got a little ear on the bottom of it there, and that little ear sticks in that little hole down there. So I'll just stick that ear right in that hole, and then get this little bolt going back in, supporting the line there. Now I would just take my wrench and tighten that up good. Okay, and right here, this line goes here. Let's see, we got, see on this one you get this little ear that it goes right in there. Okay, so this little guy is going to pop in here like that, and then this little ear is going to pop in that hole like that. Get my little clamp to where it's helping me move more freely. So it's got a little ear on this back side that just catches the side of the, no, it does have a hole. So there's two holes down there. There is this little groove. Okay, this little groove right here where my finger is right there, that's where that ear is going to go. And then this other ear inside that little hole right there. I might have to set the camera down for this. Okay, so using the 12mm socket on the ratchet wrench, I got this little piece back together. and using the 10mm on the ratchet wrench, I got this little one up here tightened up good. And now this little plastic clamp thing, it's got these little, on the end of these little, on the inside of these little deals is like a little nipple that goes in that hole there. Same thing on both sides. So I'll get that into place and snapped into place there. And there we go, there's the little plastic clamp back into place. And see, we got the top side tightened up, this bottom side tightened up, this one tightened up, that one was the 10 and this one was the 12 tightened up. Got the little plastic clip back into place. So now we're ready to get the sway bar back into place here. Okay, so this on the sway bar, you see how it's taller and this is shorter. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put a jack underneath this hub assembly right here, and I'm going to slowly jack up and get this to line up right there. And once I get that to line up, then I can push this back in there and get the nut back on there. Okay, so all I did was get a floor jack under the hub there and start jacking up, and it didn't need to go up much, and I was able to get it to go in. So now I can get the nut on there. Okay, now that that is now that nut is back on, I tighten that up real good with the ratchet wrench, and that one was the 17mm on that nut. Now that I got that nice and tightened up with the 17mm, now I'm ready to go ahead and get the wheel put back on. I'll place the wheel on and spin the lug nuts as much as I can by hand, and lower the vehicle back to the ground to torque it down. So for anybody this video might help, well, it's actually a pretty easy procedure. I think anybody could do this if they needed to. Okay, well, good luck everybody. Bye.